Now let me ask you, who will be able to vote in the upcoming US election? Now, this question is not as simple as it seems. You see, more than 350 million people are living in the United States, but this includes green card holders, international students, and illegal migrants too, which is, by the way, a hot button topic in this election. Out of the 350 million people, only about 240 million people can cast their vote in the upcoming election. Does that include migrants? Why is citizenship a raging debate in the US presidential race? Also, what role does race play in this election? Here's a report.
As borders are, Kamala threw open our borders and allowed 20 million illegal aliens to stampede into our country from all over the world.
Every U.S. citizen has the right to vote. And this year, every eligible voter's ballot will decide who will be the next U.S. president. The 2024 race for the White House will see over 200 million Americans cast their vote.
I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
However, there are over 350 million people living in the United States. So why isn't the number of eligible voters higher? And is voting restricted only to American citizens? Voting is a fundamental and guaranteed right to citizens of the United States. Only they are allowed to cast their ballot to be eligible. Here's what the requirements are. A person has to be a U.S. citizen. This could be through birth in the U.S. Through birth overseas to parents who are U.S. citizens. Then there is the process of naturalization. It is the process of voluntarily becoming a U.S. citizen, and then you also have to be 18 years and older on voting day. If you meet these requirements, then you may register to become a voter and cast your ballot in the U.S. elections. So U.S. citizens can cast their vote and pick their next president. They can also pick their governors and mayors by voting in the state and local elections. But what about those who are not U.S. citizens but are living in the country? This includes people who are in America on work visas or those who have acquired lawful permanent resident status, also known as green cards. But what about the 50 million international tourists and the 1 million plus international students? And millions of illegal migrants? Can these people also cast their vote? Here's what the rules say. Lawful permanent residents or green card holders cannot vote in the federal elections. This includes the presidential, Senate, and House of Representatives races. Additionally, green card holders also cannot vote in state elections. That's because most U.S. states follow federal law. However, green card holders can exercise their voting rights in certain towns and cities where local law allows them to vote. States like Maryland and Vermont allow green card holders to vote. However, U.S. federal law allows green card holders to participate in other political activity. This can include volunteering in political campaigns or advocating for social issues. And what about the others? Well, apart from green card holders, international tourists, students, people on work visas, or illegal migrants cannot cast their ballot in either the federal, state, or local elections. However, they can take part in political events and campaigns, but only as volunteers. This brings us to the question, why is citizenship and voting a raging debate in the United States? It all started in February, when Tesla CEO and tech billionaire Elon Musk sparked a debate on his social media platform X. He questioned U.S. President Joe Biden's migration policy. Musk said that Biden purposely had weak borders so that millions of illegal migrants could enter the U.S. Musk added that the Biden administration would fast-track citizenship for those migrants and create a permanent majority, a one-party state. The billionaire said that this was the strategy of the Democrats to ensure that they win the 2024 presidential race. Musk's tweet was not taken seriously at the time, but that all changed in June, when Joe Biden announced that he would give citizenship to 500,000 people who are undocumented spouses of Americans but have been living in the United States for over 10 years and more.
Today I'm announcing a common sense fix to streamline the process for obtaining legal status for immigrants.
And that's when the Republicans jumped on the matter. At least 16 Republican states are suing the Biden administration for this move. Elon Musk says the Democrats are importing voters. The Republican-led states argue that Biden has bypassed congressional laws to fast-track citizenship for blatant political purposes. However, the Democrats have hit back. Vice President Kamala Harris has called it Republican strategy to tear apart families. Harris has accused the Republicans of hindering the process of legalizing the migrant status of millions.
Donald Trump believes a border deal would hurt his campaign. So he ordered his allies in Congress to kill the deal. Well, I refuse to play politics with our security, and here is my pledge to you. As president, I will bring back the bipartisan border security bill that he killed, and I will sign it into law.
This brings us to the question, how easy is it to get voting rights as a migrant? And will Biden's citizenship policy benefit the Democrats? Joe Biden's citizenship eligibility program for spouses has crucial details about becoming a citizen. The program allows undocumented spouses of Americans who have lived in the U.S. for at least 10 years or more as of June 17, 2024. To apply for citizenship, they should have no criminal history and will have to provide extensive documentation of taxes and their marital status. Once the application is approved, the qualifying applicant will have 3 years to obtain a green card or risk deportation. And after getting a green card, they can apply for naturalization or full U.S. citizenship. This means that the almost 500,000 spouses of Americans will not be eligible to vote in this year's election. However, the Democrats are being criticized for pulling this move in an election year, which is in stark contrast to Donald Trump's proposal of mass deportations.
We will do large deportations.
Additionally, the path to U.S. citizenship takes roughly a decade. So the influx of immigrants during Biden's tenure will also not have a direct impact in this year's election. However, it will steer how Americans will vote this year, with border security remaining one of the top concerns. Meanwhile, both Elon Musk and Donald Trump continue to claim that the Democrats are signing up illegal migrants onto voter lists, even though they have not come forward with any evidence for their claims. Additionally, there is not enough research on whether migrants who get U.S. citizenship prefer to vote for Democrats or Republicans. So the fact still remains, despite these wild claims, that only American citizens choose their president.
The U.S. goes to polls on November 5th. The country will choose its next president. It will either be Kamala Harris from the Democratic Party or Donald Trump from the Republican Party. While there are other third-party candidates, the real race is between these two. So, who will vote for Harris? And who will try and bring Trump back to power?
Too much competition.
Right.
One way to look at potential voters is through the lens of race. The U.S. is home to more than 333 million people. This is according to the last census, taken in 2022. Now, let's break up that figure by race. About 58.9% of the U.S. population identifies as white. About 19.1% are Hispanic. Black people make up 12.6% of the U.S. population. Then, you have people of Asian descent who make up 6.1%. 2.4% of America is multiracial. 0.7% are Native American people. And Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders make up 0.2% of the population. That's the demographic breakup of the U.S. population according to the 2022 census. Let's look at the 4 biggest demographic groups, the ones most likely to influence the 2024 election. You have white people, Hispanic people, Black people, and people of Asian descent. In the last few U.S. elections, these 4 groups have made up 96 to 98% of the U.S. electorate. Look at this chart to see the composition of voters. You'll notice that it doesn't correspond to the population breakup. Even though white Americans make up less than 60% of the population, about 74% of the people who vote are white. This means white people have a disproportionately high say in the election compared to their population. Black voters come close to representing their share of the U.S. population, but Hispanic people and people of Asian descent do not have a proportional say. They have historically been underrepresented at the ballot box. So, while the four major racial groups do decide U.S. elections, white people have the biggest say by far. So, how do the different American racial groups usually vote? We'll look at the last four elections for clues. These are the 2016 presidential election between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, then the 2018 midterms, the 2020 presidential election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and then the 2022 midterms. Here's the voter breakup by race for these elections. The most obvious difference is the percentage of white voters. White voters have made up about 62% of the Democratic Party's voter base. This is across the last four elections. In contrast, white people made up about 87% of the Republican Party's voter base. They are the driving force behind the Republicans, and it seems more white people vote for the GOP than for the Democrats. This has consistently been the case. Let's zoom in on the last election. In the 2022 midterms, 57% of all white voters choose the Republican Party. 41% voted for the Democrats, and 2% cast their votes elsewhere. So Republicans have the edge when it comes to white voters. But that edge is blunted when the black vote comes into play. Let's look at the 2022 midterm statistics again. A whopping 93% of all black voters chose the Democrats. 93%. And remember, black people are relatively well represented at the ballot box. So we can say that most black Americans vote blue. This has been proven time and again. In the last four elections, black people on average made up more than 17% of the Democratic Party's voter base. 17% versus only 1% on average for the Republican Party. Now we look at Hispanic people. They make up almost 20% of the U.S. population. But when it comes to voting, they only make up about 9% of the electorate. It shows that Hispanic people are very underrepresented at the polling booth. But this 9% is still significant. It can turn the tide of any election. So Hispanic people are definitely a key demographic in the U.S. Like black voters, Hispanic voters traditionally lean towards the Democrats, but the difference in party choice is far less pronounced. Between 2016 and 2022, Hispanic people made up about 12% of the Democratic voter base on average. For the Republicans, this number was about half. About 6% of Republican voters over the last few elections have been Hispanic people. It's a 2-to-1 ratio in favor of the Democrats. But these numbers aren't set in stone. You'll notice that over time, Hispanic support for the Democrats has stagnated, whereas it has gone up for the Republicans. The swing is still minor, but this year's election could solidify the migration. And it proves that America's Hispanic population still has a big say in elections, even if it isn't proportional to the community's size. Then we have the people of Asian descent, America's fastest growing demographic. They make up only 6.1% of the population right now, according to the 2022 census. But that's 27% higher than the proportion of Asian people in 2010. So the population of Asian people in the U.S. grew by 27% between 2010 and 2022. That's much faster than any other demographic group. If this growth continues, people of Asian descent will continue to have a greater say in American politics as the years go by. Historically, this is another group that has leaned towards the Democrats, even more than Hispanic people. In 2022, 68% of all Asian Americans voted blue, compared to 60% of all Hispanic voters. So both the groups lean towards the Democratic Party. But Asian Americans slightly more so. People of Asian descent made up about 4% of the Democratic Party's voter base over the last 4 elections. That fell to about 2% for the Republicans. But again, there's a caveat here. In 2016 and 2018, barely any Asian Americans voted red. But in the 2020 presidential elections, Asian American support for the Republicans surged. They made up 3% of the Republican voter base. It was a historic high. With Trump contesting again, more Asian Americans might be tempted to vote red once more.
Thank you, everybody.
So that's how the biggest racial groups in the US usually vote. White people lean towards the Republicans. Black people overwhelmingly vote for the Democrats. Hispanic people and people of Asian descent have historically voted in favor of the Democrats as well. But the gap seems to be narrowing. And this should worry Kamala Harris and encourage Donald Trump.